some new evaluations for how projects would impact the environment. So there's some of you might have heard of the new site suitability criteria. So each project will have to be graded against how it affects the environment. There's a preliminary, I can send this to the planning board so they can post it and send it out. It mostly exists right now as a screening tool. And that's still being finalized, and our regulations based on the site suitability scoring, mitigation will be required for projects. So the consolidated local permitting process will factor in more of those. It'll weigh more how projects are impact the environment and try to mitigate those effects. So the most important pieces for you all is that local zoning will still be in effect. Our regulations do not override local zoning. So if you're working on these updated bylaws, projects that come through the local level, those will still apply. So with the transition date, so starting July 1st, 2026, you can start accepting those consolidated local permits. You don't have to, you can have time. The most important piece for towns to be prepared is to decide who's going to be your local government representative. So there will have to be someone in town who's kind of the shepherd of the process. So there's new pre-filing requirements that apply to public engagement processes. So you want someone making sure that's all done correctly, working with the applicant. And you'll also need someone to ensure any application is complete. That person will also be responsible for reviewing the site suitability scoring and looking at what mitigation would be required. So that's a role that you'll have to decide on who's gonna do that. We aren't requiring you to have a specific person in town serve as a local government representative. You could have the planning board chair, you could have the conservation commission be there. Your town administrator. I know it's yeah. It's more work. It's more work on your committee. You can also have multiple local government representatives. So if you wanted one person looking at tree filing, you can see that. If you have other probably discussion under litigation, that could be different. Those are really the big pictures are having all the different anything go ahead.
Who does the suitability scoring?
So that'll be done by the applicant, but it's an online tool that the executive office is rolling out. So the way that it works, it's an online tool, so they're just slotting their project and then it automatically issues. They're automatically scored. Okay. If there are concerns about the underlying data, then the town or someone could file a scoring revision request. And then it can be reviewed.
And so is that process already available to file the revision request?
I can see her, I can hear her. That we're working on the paperwork for it, but
okay.
that process is in our regulations. That process will exist.
Okay, just for we already reviewed. I know you and I looked at it, and we just didn't feel like the suitability criteria or basically the attributes that they were looking at for suitability were reflected correctly the town of Plainfield.
Okay.
In terms of things like, can you give some examples of the criteria?
Yeah, so I think when we met, I could run there's cumulative impact analysis, which is under the Energy Facility Siting Board and that for small project site suitability. So site suitability is looking at projects would affect biodiversity, agricultural resources, climate resilience, carbon sequestration, and social and environmental.
So we just want to make sure that all of those attributes for Plainfield are correctly reflected in the tool.
Yeah.
Instead of someone outside of Plainfield in Boston, maybe, who put in the data for what they thought to be true about Plainfield.
Gotcha.
Okay.
An additional question on that, I understand these are the attributes, but the weights that they get in the model, is the model published?
The model is published, yeah, I'll make sure they have all the links, so. My department is responsible for saying how it'll work, but it's a different state department that's rolling that out. It's currently out for public comment.
Okay.
So I can get it to you if you're interested in how their process works.
Great, thank you.
And when the town receives that score, do we also receive information about the data that the applicant input so the town can verify that is correctly?
Yeah, they try to develop the tool so it's as simple as possible. So all the applicant will have to do is draw on the site.
Okay.
It's just a polygon and then it automatically gets put through.
Okay.
So they're not really responsible for putting in any data that could. It's more like if there was a site and the town thought there were other features that are not covered in data, or the data is too old to reflect current conditions.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be more of the concern of the revision.
So the data is like soil type,
Soil type is,
vegetation.
yep, it's biomap,
wetlands.
yeah, biomap data, data from, I think it's the Nature Conservancy for their carbon sequestration. Yeah, so it's publicly available data sets.
Okay, is that all sort of what's on the GIS layer?
So we're having we have a site where the soil was tested in December in one or two spots, but it wasn't comprehensive. So how simple is the data that whatever company is putting in, because it isn't reflective of the whole site?
Right, yeah, so it's really just like a screening tool to get the score to determine the mitigation. It's not that specific.
Right, but we need to be that specific. So how would that tool help us?
I mean, it's really just a screening tool to determine mitigation to try and make the project not disturb the environment as much as possible. So that granular level is not going to be reflected in that tool.
Okay. So it would just come back to us.
Yeah, but if there was a site and the soil conditions were different, then what's in that, they should file a revision request. Revision request.
Okay, and is that binding in some way?
The revision request?
No, whatever the state, they say, okay, this is the impact, and is that binding to anyone, or can, besides, even if we put in a revision, say, I guess?
I mean, it's really no, it's not binding, it's a tool meant to guide how the project would be conditioned. Okay, I guess that's.
So can you go through a little bit for us so we understand the new process? Because right now, if there's a project proposed in town, they go through our building inspector, file a zoning determination form, and he determines that it needs a special permit. Then it comes to us as the special permit granting authority, and we have our public process. It seems like there's some tools that are going to pre-screen an application before it goes through that process, or?
Yeah, but it wouldn't affect how your local permitting works, like they would still will go through there. I think. So backing up, so if the applicant chooses to do the consolidated local permitting process, there will be a refiling period where they'll have to do more public engagement. They'll file the application, town will have time to confirm the application is complete, and then once you confirm the application is complete, you'll have 12 months to go through that permit process. So if the current process would be for your building inspector or zoning enforcement officer to go first and then bring it to you, that can still stay back.
Then statutorily have obligation, special permits that are shorter than a 12-month window.
We do,
We do.
but I think this would be combine all committees together, right? So
You combine together and that you have to issue a decision within 12 months, but you would still be issuing your separate.
Right.
Yeah, that, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so our regulations don't affect like any of those timelines, any of the, yeah, I know the conservation commission, they have their own timelines of. Having hearing, we do not change that at all.
Why would a company, somebody who's proposed a project not go through the new consolidated project?
Yes, that's a great question. I imagine that for, like a small project that doesn't have any wetland impacts, maybe in a town where they would need a special permit, it's maybe just site plan review. They wouldn't do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that the consolidated local permitting process was used when an applicant wants, the predictable timeline of knowing that once they have filed a complete application, they'll have it.
Question, so these new guidelines that you say come into effect in October, I thought it was July.
So the regulations, that's a good question. So starting July 1st, 2026, all of the large projects will start going to the Energy Facility Site Board.
Yeah, that's over 25.
That, yep, over 25, generation per megawatts, 100 megawatts of storage. Under that, starting July 1st, a town can choose to start accepting the permits. You don't have to.
Okay,
You have from July to October to choose your local government representative. Yeah, get that process.
so once we, these projects are evaluated for site suitability,
Mhm.
correct? What kind of, how does that affect what we do? In other words, these sound like more like suggestions than requirements.
In terms of, we're putting out a guideline on mitigation and how that would work. But the general idea is that if a project scores, low under the site suitability score tool, not that much mitigation would be required. Because it's well cited, it's not affecting the environment. If there's a higher score, then more work will be required. So we're working on determining what that would look like. But like one example could be if there was tree clearing involved. The town, one reasonable mitigation measure might be to require conserving more forest land on that parcel at like a 3-to-1 ratio of what was cut down. So something like that, that wouldn't be covered in the standard permit process.
So it's basically a guidance tool.
It's a guidance tool,
For
but
the committees and commissions.
correct, but you will ultimately be able to choose what that is.
Okay, the other thing is that, how will this affect the payment the ratepayers pay to these developers to subsidize their projects?
I mean, the purpose of speeding up the process is to make the outcomes more, predictable. So we're hoping that, you know, everything that's going into place would help to keep costs low.
Well, I think I asked about subsidies that, the ratepayers pay for to go to these developers, right, to develop. Would it affect them at all?
Affect the ratepayers, so like in your town, if a project was put up, would it affect?
Not locally, I mean, in general, everybody pays a certain amount of money for the electric bill goes into the renewable energy development.
Yeah.
And then that's a little subsidy that developers get from that, as I understand it.
You might be talking about the SMART program?
Yeah, it's basically smart.
Yeah, so if a developer, goes under the SMART program, then yes, they would get financial.
I mean, that's a distinction I'm really interested in. If the developer chooses to go under this program, which of course they're going to do because they want these incentives. It's financially advantageous. But we don't. That's not a legal question. It's not being mandated by Massachusetts. Which sometimes the developers are representing it as if it has to be that way.
No, they can opt into. The SMART program.
No, Band-Aid, eliminate grandfathering for permits that have already been, or not permits, applications that have already been submitted to towns and they're working through everything.
Yeah, these regulations would only apply to projects that file once the regulations are in place. So if you have a project moving through town right now, then no, these regulations.
So we have actually 3 projects.
Mm-hmm.
And it would, if they all pass, we would have 100 acres of clear cut land for these projects. Does that sound right to you? Okay, fair enough, fair enough. So once this goes into effect, let's say March 1st, because these would, I think, would all fall under the smaller projects. How would that affect the permits that are already put in, which is what Robert's asking?
These regulations will not affect projects that have already been permitted. They would only, if you had one of your projects, if the developer chose to pull it and then file a consolidated local permit, once that's, then they would affect, but otherwise, yeah.
Okay.
So they have to be permitted, but if they're already applied upon and still in the permitting
Well, that's-
process. Thanks, Boy.
No, this would not make any permitted projects null and void. No, they wouldn't go through the permitting process again. Yeah, if you're working on permitting a project right now.
Okay.
Can everybody try to speak up a little bit more? I'm hearing from the chat that it's hard to hear online, so thank you.
You mentioned that, the local zoning, the town's local zoning is still in effect for small projects. What about the large scale projects that are reviewed by the state? Does our zoning still apply in any way?
It might, it's possible that once projects are at that level, the applicant could apply for a zoning waiver. But that's part of the energy facility study board process. One important thing to note that for the large projects, as a part of the new regulations, is that towns will automatically be granted intervenor status. So that used to be something you had to apply for, it's now automatic, so the town would be having to sit at the table.
Can you describe that a little bit?
That's more over at the say the study board.
But the intervenor process is that there is a large project proposed, and the town still has the ability to participate in the conversation.
Correct.
I was wondering in the guidelines, and in that polygon you were talking about, if there's anything that takes into account, like we're a very small town geographically,
Yeah.
as well as people wise. There's already one, you're saying there might be 3 more. So does, like, let's say the 3rd project in line, which would be the 4th one built. Is there any of whatever category?
I know, yeah, it's more like equitable distribution.
Yeah,
projects.
that,
Not at the moment, no. Yeah, I know, I know there was also, so for larger projects, well, can be scored under a cumulative impact analysis, and I
Yeah.
think there's been a lot of comments about trying to get that in the mix, I think. You know, it's partially a data issue, but yeah, I know there have been calls for that, but as it stands right now, it's not in the site suitability scoring.
well, you can pass along.
I think we had, when we spoke, we had, my comment was fair share. Like,
Yes.
You know, eventually town gets to their fair share, like this is, you know, there's only so much we can take on in terms of.
Yeah, yeah, legally at the moment, we don't really have to pay that side access.
I mean, fair share for me is an interesting concept. I mean, that the corridor itself is already a massive infrastructural feature that serves the entire state. I could, not knowing very much, only what I know now, argue that we've already done our fair share, if that's the framing. So I think a lot of people tend to feel that way.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Allison?
Yeah, we aren't still clear on, you were talking about, Rob was asking about. If someone has applied early on,
Mhm.
but has not been permitted. and they don't get permitted after March first, would then these new regulations apply to them?
No.
So it has to do when they submit their
Application.
applications?
Yeah, so if an applicant came in August 2nd and we're accepting consolidated local permits and they said, we want to go through that process, then our regulations will be in effect.
For the consolidated approach?
Yeah.
What about the other approach, the local approach?
So they can choose to either participate in the local approach as it currently exists. Nothing will change about that, or they can participate in the consolidated local process. They have the option.
Okay,
Once you start accepting that. So after October 1st, I guess maybe that's the easiest way to think about it. After October 1st, you will have had to say we're accepting consolidated local permits. So at that point,
oh, I see.
all projects will, the developer, the way the Climate Act was written, the developer gets to choose. If they want to do the traditional permit pathway or the consolidated process.
So there's really three processes. Really. There's the process of the big projects at level.
Yeah.
There's the consolidated
Yeah.
process, and then there's the process that towns already have.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so yes, those are the three options.
Can I ask, just out of curiosity, no judgment. Why do you think the state is putting this process into place? Is it to help the towns? Is it to help the state? Is it to help developers? I don't, because from our perspective, I think at this point, it doesn't help us at all
Help
with appropriate citing.
Right, so this new process came about 2 years ago. There was a commission on clean energy infrastructure siting and permitting, and one of their main findings was that the permitting process was, their clean energy infrastructure was taking too long. And by 2050, the state has to be net zero, so all of these regulations are meant to speed up that process.
So it's really to help the state meet its obligation. It's not really to help these small towns navigate this process.
Well, that's what our regulations are meant to do, is to try and define the process of how to work at the local level. I mean, this site suitability scoring tool and the mitigation processes is supposed to have towns get better outcomes for the projects that are built in their communities. And same with the large projects. So it's trying to, streamline the permitting and also make sure that projects are set in appropriately, and if they're not, that there's appropriate mitigation.
Is the state, and you may or may not know this, because it may not be in your jurisdiction, but is the state making an attempt to help these small towns where most of the sites are being clear cut? Specifically in Plainfield anyway, is the state making an effort to preserve the environment from that kind of approach?
So the new SMART program rolled out this fall, and that's the program where there's financial incentives for projects that are under 5 megawatts. They no longer offer financial incentives for projects that are on forest land that sequesters a lot of carbon. There's a screening tool for that. You can't get financial incentives if the project impacts for habitat. So we're trying to no longer financially incentivize those types of projects, and same thing with the site suitability screening, or if a project is going to impact the environment like that, then there's going to be a lot of mitigation to offset it. But we can't outright prohibit.
No, sure.
Yeah, sure. So that's kind of like, trying to.
Strike some sort of balance.
Yeah.
But that still doesn't apply to any projects that have submitted their plans or permit, or request for a special permit before March 1st.
March 1st is when the regulations are published, but it's really the deadlines are after July 1st. But yes, if a project is currently being permitted, these regulations are not.
is there a tool for towns to try to get that information or, you know, to use that kind of approach?
Yeah, when I met with Kathy Huber, the other piece, or as a part of our regulation package, we have put out environmental health and safety standards, which compile all of the current laws that would apply to projects, as well as the NFPA 855 standards. That's for like fire code, but we're hoping that those are helpful tools so you can see what a project can be conditioned with. We also, yeah, we're trying to put out more information about how a project could be conditioned. So you can still use those tools. But yeah.
And can you clarify this, the changes in the SMART program are unrelated to the changes in this new process? So when you just talked about the changes that went in effect into the SMART program, so that projects that were maybe not that were involving cutting down a lot of trees or impacting, something that conservation commission, that's in effect
Now,
now.
yeah, I just wanted to like, what
Yeah.
is this?
Yeah.
Oh, wait, so.
So if there's a project that is gonna do clear cutting, they can no longer go to the SMART program and say, hey, we want to be part of the SMART program, want to get some incentives. And then people can participate in this project, townspeople, and get a discount on their, that whole incentives process. They're not giving incentives to certain projects anymore because of the impact they might be having on trees or conservation or those types of things. That's in effect now. Those SMART changes are
We had a question from online. How can towns know what incentives developers would or are receiving from the state for a specific project?
They could, the only incentives from the state would be through the SMART program, so that could be asked during an application project. SMART incentives normally come after the project's already been permitted.
Wait, can you go back to that?
I think we could ask next week, when the developers are here, this could be a question.
Right, sorry, but they have to apply for the SMART incentives,
Yeah.
like once the project has been permitted, but I would assume that when they're developing and planning the project, they would know where to apply.
So we have one vendor who said, yes, we're going to be part of the SMART program. We have another vendor that did not ever mention that they would be part of the SMART program. So we have one. So Blue Wave, when they did their public meeting, they had mentioned explicitly that they would be part of the SMART program.
They're also removing a lot of trees, right? That's what.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, so I know.
So that means they wouldn't necessarily, I don't know, because I don't know the acreage or anything, but. So if they were cutting down a lot of trees and then said, we want to be part of the SMART program, they may not get the funding, is that a fair assumption?
Can you say that again?
Well, if we, or let's say that we've given a permit to Blue Wave and they cut down 25 acres of trees. And then they apply.
No, that's not how it works.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
There's a tool that they would screen the project to see if they're eligible or not for the SMART incentives. I was talking more like procedurally of when they apply for. Yeah, no, I understand.
So the SMART program has certain criteria that has to be met. And if they apply to be part of the SMART program, they have to meet that criteria. If they don't qualify, they don't qualify. So
but that doesn't have anything to do with our process necessarily.
Right.
Okay.
that's a separate process that they apply for.
Is there any sufficient for, fully designed, projects that are gonna happen before March 1st? I mean, we're gonna be inundated by, 3 projects in this community. The one we're reviewing now, I think is very poorly designed, and it's been revised and revised and revised. they'll just throw an application in with minimum requirements. And consequently, we're gonna have to deal with these things and these people stumble through these projects. We're doing that now, you know? Is the state made any provision for that kind of,
I can't speak, yeah, these regulations only apply to projects starting next year.
I mean, we've got some on the docket or coming up and, you know, they're gonna get these applications in because they don't wanna deal with anything that's coming down from the state.
And I also think that, I mean, you can share the dates. I think it has more to do with federal incentives expiring than this new process from the state that's making it rush. You can confirm.
I can't say I know, but I would say that what I've heard in from other towns is that their sense is that it's the tax credits expiring, that everyone is in a rush to get the projects in. And it's,
All in rush.
yeah, and it's,
And
I know.
rush doesn't generally bring good projects to the table. So,
yeah, no, the timing of all this is, it's tough and I understand this.
and you know you're in a town that deals with volunteers and the state knows that too, right?
Yes.
We don't have a professional planning board or conservation commission or board of health.
Although we admire them.
Yes.
Especially admired. Praise them, because they do a lot of good work. But still, we're still volunteers primarily.
No, there are a lot of wonderful volunteers across all of Western Mass doing this, and I know it's a lot, and
Just wonder how much the state is taking towns like Plainfield and surrounding towns and hills into account when they come up with these kinds of plans.
yeah, I mean, we're doing our best to make these regulations work for all
Yeah.
communities. I know it's one size fits all never works, but we're.
We know how the state's skewed.
Hey,
Yeah, going back to the site suitability criteria for just a second.
Yep.
You say that tool was available online already?
Yes, a preliminary version of it is
Okay.
available. I will forward, if it's okay, the latest draft guidance and tool, so you can take a look at it.
Is that functional? Like, could a town decide that that is going to be a part of, could they start using that now to inform the process?
You're not gonna be happy
You're not
when
gonna
you
be
see
happy.
it either. That's, I think it's, we need to put some work into, I don't think it reflects our town.
Okay.
I mean, are the needs of our town, but the way it is now. I mean, but.
So that's
Separate
from the mass adoption.
Okay.
They're tools, two screening tools, and I think the site suitability
Uh-huh,
is a bit more of what you're looking for.
okay.
But
Are aquifers part of this, calculation?
on the site suitability scoring tool, they're not directly factored in. That could be done more through zoning, board of health regulations, though that's still all of that. But to your question about if the town could use it now, that's more of a legal question that I can't quite answer, but I mean, you're welcome to, review it.
Thanks.
so Austin, are you, as coordinator, after this gets rolled out, you're gonna continue to be our liaison to help us as we learn on this learning curve?
Yes, so I can, it's, a bit of a balancing act in terms of what I can literally do, like I can't necessarily work directly with you on your bylaws, but like in terms of rolling out the process, I can, answer any questions.
So, sorry,
I'm just, so for example, we get an application in July 1. There are questions we have about the application process, whether it's client or whatever. Is that the kind of stuff you're gonna help us with?
when we have our draft bylaws,
Mhm.
ready to present to the
Yeah.
town, would you be able to say, oh, this will never fly legally, or things like that, or yes or no?
I could try, I will try. I can get, I will ask the team about what are my senses that I will. It'll be fine.
Even just some question marks here, like,
Yeah.
or flags, red flags, before we put it
but, have everyone discussing it.
Yeah, I mean, if you were putting forth something that said, no solar allowed anywhere in town, I can tell you that that will not fly, but, yeah. Otherwise, yeah, I can do my best to help.
I'm sorry.
So yeah, Elizabeth Lambert, 47 Grand Street. I was wondering, would you have information about I'm not sure what your geographical thing is, but would you have information about what other towns are doing, like comparable towns, and think, oh, that's a good idea, and we haven't thought of it, and,
Yeah, you can always ask, I mean, if something comes up,
but you have, what other people are doing, right?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, right, yep, I'm working in Berkshire, Franklin, and Hampton counties, I know you've been working with the regional planning unit states as well, they're a great resource. Yeah.
Okay,
Great.
Is there anyone in Masco that is reaching out to the solar companies to try and encourage them to use more appropriate siting?
I mean, they've been working with us on the rollout of the regulations. Developers were a part of that, commission that started back in 2023 to reform fighting, so they're all involved in this process.
But like, I'm gonna reach out to our representatives because it seems that maybe Masco, with all this, wants to encourage siting on rooftops or brown areas, and
Yeah.
rather than us having to be on the defensive, maybe Masco could go on the offensive to try and move the companies to that direction.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the purpose of these regulations, and that it's gonna be a lot more streamlined and easier to build a project on a parking lot or a rooftop. I mean, the site suitability criteria won't apply to rooftop projects. It won't apply to parking lot canopies, there are exemptions for that, so we're trying to make it easier for those projects to go through. That's,
Fair enough.
yeah. Sorry, I probably should have said that up top.
That's okay.
But, yeah, I mean, I think that message has been heard loud and clear. So that is our hope. And again, trying to push the levers of trying to make, we hear a lot that it's more expensive to build on parking lot canopies. So again, just trying to, that's why it's like the cost of steel to raise the panels high enough, but
Yeah, that's why the SMART program isn't doing what it needs to do.
yeah, so.
Not enough of an incentive.
But now the new SMART program, I believe, offers a bigger incentive, so again, just trying to help those projects get built. That's what we have.
talk a little bit about state guidelines or the feelings about solar or only versus solar with BESS.
I mean, battery storage is an important part of the transition to clean energy. They put back on the grid, during times of high demand. If we don't have battery storage, we're gonna keep running the peaker plants that are fossil fuel powered. So that's why there are more incentives to pair battery storage with solar, so that there's more opportunities to have clean energy.
I got a question. Why can't the batteries in the old peaker plants? I mean,
Because we haven't totally phased off of them yet, so I mean, that could be an option.
this is probably all junk parking lots and destroyed land around them anyway. So put them there.
It's an option.
It's an option that nobody talks about. It's not much of an option. But it's a good option. It should be talked about.
Do you know how far away the batteries can be from from the panels that are generating that?
I'm not, like the required,
I mean, could they be in another town, but have the solar panels here, but the batteries be far away somewhere?
that would be a separate project, yeah, but I mean, you can have batteries. Standalone battery storage, they don't necessarily have to be connected to solar panels. You can have You can have just solar canopies, you can have solar canopies connected to battery storage, and you can have standalone battery storage.
There's a lot, no, with the batteries being offsite, there's a lot of parasitic loss
Okay,
via the transmission lines.
Right.
So why not put them in the right of ways, the transmission lines, right? That'd make a lot of sense.
If they're so safe, that's where they ought to be, it's right where their connections are. We have lots of infrastructure, in our right of way up here in town. Nobody's worried about anything happening there, and we want to have these best systems right underneath the power lines.
Is there
So
any-
safe, they're never gonna blow up or burn. So we don't have to worry about the transmission lines.
Yeah, but in my defense, and for my project, you're only moving the battery 600 feet to underneath the power lines.
Fine,
So that does not suit the worries of the people that are surrounding the area,
600 feet sounds good to me.
which would actually put it closer to Paige's house.
No.
Because of the
we'd be
wetlands.
Closer to Pages.
Well, the batteries would be because of the wetlands. If they were underneath the power lines.
To me, there's a,
Is that true?
It is.
I don't know. You know where Paige lives.
Yes, I said, because I live right next door. Yeah,
But
and I also know where the wetlands are.
Yeah, but I mean, there's hundreds of miles of right of way on.
Yeah, but I'm saying it was attached to the project.
Yeah.
That's where they would be.
Okay. Josh, did you?
yeah, I mean, I think that's a open question, and I'd like to hear from an engineer about whether there should be large batteries underneath high voltage lines. That's not, it's not just like a blank slate underneath there. There's a huge electromagnetic field that's going straight down.
Yeah,
Yeah, we did, the town, just to share with you, the town was approached about a potential best storage system that would be located near the substation. And it was not gonna be underneath the power lines because they couldn't site it there. But it was going to be pretty close to the intersection of Central Street and North Union. And we had really large concerns because of the scale of it and also the impact it's gonna have on us. So
I missed that.
we had large concerns about the scale. And so we told the developer that we didn't, under its current proposed concept, it didn't really fall into the rural character and the sort of underlying premise of our zoning bylaw, and we would ask him to think about how he was gonna mitigate that before he came to us with a larger proposal, and he hasn't, that hasn't gone anywhere in 8 months now. So, but anyway, any other more questions for Allison?
And Allison is based in Greenfield, so she's
Oh.
close to us. She's not. Kind of Boston, probably.
Good to know. My hometown.
Oh,
So let's move on the agenda because we have some more things to cover.
Thank you, Alice.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I do appreciate all your questions, and yeah, I know it's a lot of work.
Yeah, we want to get paid.
If I could.
So I'm gonna suggest that we move the fifth item on the agenda up next, because I think maybe this community benefits agreement potential possibility should be part of our discussion before we talk about next steps in terms of how we pull together. I was approached a couple weeks ago to participate in a conversation with Young Shu, who is a planner for MIT and runs what's called the MIT Renewable Energy Clinic. And he reached out to us as a community because our local reporter, who happens to be in the room, had an article that got onto Mass Live, and he found out that we were sort of in the epicenter of the solar rollout and issues within Western Mass. And basically the renewable energy, and so anyway, we had a call, Kathy and I sat in on it, and the clinic basically takes their students and puts them through a semester of working with either a town on a specific application or the town in general on how we might shape a conversation prior to an application being submitted that includes a community benefit agreement, which means then that the developer is required to work with the town and the stakeholders in the town to come up with a community outreach program that provides some benefit to the community if it's going to develop within the town. And the process that they're proposing that we go through as a town is for us to have conversations with all the stakeholders in town. The students would come out, talk to the residents, talk to the members of the board, talk to the agencies that permit, talk to the boards, talk to the energy suppliers, and try to come up with a pulse on what are the issues that we are concerned about as a community with respect to how renewable energy gets rolled out in our community, and what we would look to as a incentive for a developer to come to town if they were going to propose something. So what would we get out of it? And it could include things like considerations to abutters that happen to be near a project versus those of us who aren't next to a project. It could concern issues we have related to safety and environmental impacts. So it would give us a chance to really do what we need to do, which is to have the conversation we need to have to understand what it is about solar development and renewable energy that we are anxious about, and what it is that we are willing to accept, so that we can, as a community, not see these developments necessarily as an assault on our community, but as a participant in the development of our community. And so they sent a letter of understanding to us for me to sign and for the select board to sign. And once they do that, they're the students are gonna come out here and meet with us, meet with people individually, and start to collect data and information. And they're gonna compile all that, put it together with some recommendations. So it's a chance for us to maybe be on the cutting edge of how small communities can understand our role in this renewable energy transformation to go through, and also how we can embrace it in a way that is compatible with what our values are. So I think that's a really important conversation to have, and I will be reaching out to the community for people who want to participate, and I'm certain they will have ideas of people we should include. But I think it's a pretty exciting opportunity, and they're going to do it in a time frame that is starts in February and runs through the end of their semester. So it will tie in pretty tightly with our goal for having some criteria in place for our town meeting for zoning revision. So our goal is to have that. Right now, we have a very loose community outreach requirement in our bylaw. We say that developers should provide a community outreach plan. That's all we say. But we don't talk about any of the criteria that might be included in us evaluating that outreach or how it works. So it's an opportunity for us as a community to acknowledge that this is happening for us, and also understand how we might shape how it impacts us. So that's a pretty exciting opportunity, and I don't know anything more about it than that, but if anybody has any questions about it, I'll try to answer
Is part of that, community outreach, are they gonna give some sort of financial kickback to the town or the citizens? That'll make it in any way alleviate some of the loss of the burdened, nature of this town and, I mean. I don't know what else I can say.
it. Well, yeah,
I mean, there's gotta be some sort of financial kickback to the town.
well, but they do pay a pretty good amount of taxes. The value of these projects are millions of dollars, and so they're paying, well, the one project we have, I think their annual tax bill is in the $90,000 range
To the town or to the state?
to the town. So and that's part of what's called a pilot program, payment in lieu of taxes, and they do that because equipment depreciates in value. So what they want to do is to stabilize their operating costs, so they negotiate with the town payment in lieu of taxes that normalizes the value over the life of the project, so they pay the same amount every year. And that gives us the security of knowing we're gonna get that same amount of money every year, so we can plan on it for our budgeting.
And what is the end result? Because once they've depreciated all their, equipment, it becomes obsolete.
Right, and
And then,
they have to remove it there's a bond that requires them to remove it.
Yeah.
Or upgrade it, in which case it gets renewed.
Yeah.
So, so there are some financial benefits in place, but I think that our values go beyond the dollars and cents. They go beyond our environment, and they go beyond our quality of life, and they go to the things the reason why we live here.
Yeah.
And, so having that conversation and understanding how we might shape our bylaw revisions to include, a pretty well delineated, or at least articulated goal for how we want to have these people partnership with us in town would be a really important conversation to have.
I think it sounds great because what it would do is make our job easier because we can't talk to every single person in town, but these guys can canvass more people than we as a board can, and more people that then show up at meetings.
And also, if we have a consensus that we can work towards and an understanding, then when we have a project that comes through and it meets those criteria, we have some comfort in knowing that the board is going to execute the permits in a way that's consistent with that, and that all of the concerns are going to be met, so that it takes some of the pressure off of us as boards as well, because now we've already predefined issues that we want to have considered. So, yeah.
Just on that, it's an addendum, because I've heard this a little bit in conversations I've had outside of tonight, but I feel like it creeps in a little bit too, where there's a view that the corridor itself is already kind of spoiled land, which, like if you're gonna do anything, try to do it there, or maybe widen it, like, it's actually not. So, in this, as we build consensus or as we envision what is suitable or not, we just like to put a point in here now, and you can talk to me later if you want, but it's an important wildlife corridor. And it's not like just where further development should be shoehorned, in my opinion. When you're considering what you think is useful or good or tolerable, I would not consider that spoiled land in Plainfield.
I agree. The interesting thing about our power corridor is that it is one of the only corridors in the Northeast that's identified as a corridor of national interest because of its connection to the Northfield Mountain Project and the Bear Swamp Project. And so it already has a strong renewable component that is its foundation. And so the reason why we're seeing pressure is that it has been defined as a corridor, and that's what, that needs to be, upgraded to handle the capacity that people project. It's gonna be, they project an 800% growth in demand along our corridor based upon the usage of the municipalities and areas that are served. So that's one reason why the piano was on our book in particular, because we happen to be on at one of the clover leaves on the interchange. So
I think the other thing that was interesting that they talked about in terms of support, so that I thought would be helpful, so they're gonna do the stakeholder assessment and then they'll give a final assessment report. But the other things that I thought was interesting that they've done in other towns, they do like Zoom hotlines. So they'll have just like Zoom sessions and people from town can just dial into the Zoom, ask questions, get answers, share feedback. They'll do a series of information sessions for individuals to learn more about solar, learn more about BESS, learn more about all these kinds of questions that we've had as a town, so we have a shared understanding. And then if they need to bring in experts from MIT to talk in more detail about what is this, what is the future, what does it mean from a conservation commission, what does it mean from a health perspective, what does it mean from a fire manager, like they'll tap into their experts and bring them to kind of participate in the discussion. So not only is it kind of helping us get consensus, hopefully it's also kind of educating us together in terms of what is this space and what does it mean to our town.
Two really simple questions. What are these kids studying? Like, what is the class that they're coming from?
Their Department of Urban Studies and Planning at MIT, their doctorate and master's.
So, and so are you proposing this because you need a consensus from us that it's okay, or you can make the decision anyway?
well, I'm sharing it because I think it's gonna be an opportunity for all of us to participate, and I think we're excited about it. So yeah, we're gonna go ahead because we think it has great potential.
Excellent.
The interviews, are these anonymous or
Yes.
town know who's participated, or how does that
So,
work?
well, in order to have a real candid conversation, people need to be able to speak freely, so they do it in a way that does not tie a conversation to an individual. So, and I think the only way you can speak freely is, as our friend El Proctor would say, if it's off the record. All that chat. What do you want to see here? Sorry. What the town would be happy to have. You're spending much time here, so it might as well.
I just want to say, so many people come to these meetings, and we do need a few more members on the board.
Right.
So if you're gonna be here anyway, think about being on the planning board.
We still need one more member.
Yes.
Yeah. So, any other questions on that concept? Yeah.
Sorry, one more. Do you have a sense of, I guess, how this is funded? Is this a state funded project, or have they gone into that at all?
This is funded entirely by MIT.
Okay.
It's a free service to the town.
Okay.
Tuition based.
Yeah, it's part of their outreach, and they have developed this program by proposal to up and down the East Coast to other universities that have planning departments. I actually was so excited about it, I sent the 3-pager outline of it to my alma mater because I'm a graduate of the University of Cincinnati Architecture Program and recently made a connection with the director of planning out there. So I'm trying to, it seems to me that as planners and as citizens, the only way to really embrace growth and development is to have an understanding of how it impacts everyone. And you talk about projects being well designed or not well designed. Well, a project that's well designed is a project that considers the people that it impacts. And all of these projects impact us as residents. not just the people that own the land or the people that are living next door. It impacts all of us. And so we're the user group, and this is a great opportunity for us as users to let our needs be known, understand that, because I certainly don't know what everybody's thinking and where people stand. And so anyway, I'm pretty excited about the opportunity. I think it's a great idea. It's a stroke of luck for us.
Sounds very good. Can I ask one question about something you said though, because, and maybe I misunderstood. Is somebody saying, I don't know who the somebody is, that, that Western Mass is gonna grow by 800% in usage, or is it
The demand-
cities?
No,
Or-
the demand on this particular power corridor, amount of energy that it needs to transmit, capacity is gonna grow by 800%.
But it's being sent to Boston, New York, it's not just.
AI.
Yeah.
It is AI, but it also, you have to understand that in order for us to get carbon neutral, the only way to do that is through electrification.
Sure.
So if we, as we hopefully get to the point where we're not as reliant on carbon producing energy sources, that power has to come from somewhere. And the only way to have electrification be the way forward in terms of climate is if it's from renewable resources. And the only way for a renewable resource grid to work is if it has storage capacity when it can't produce, which is why we have this combination of battery storage and transmission and
Generation.
excuse me?
Generation.
And generation, yeah, definitely. So it's part of our future. It's the only really path forward we have to the planet.
That wasn't my question though.
But I'm just saying that
My question is, where's the corridor?
the border is power line.
Oh, where does it start? Once.
So,
Starts in Canada, doesn't it?
well, the power grid is all interconnected, but this particular line, which goes from Northfield Mountain, goes into the middle of New York State. So Albany is involved, Utica, New York is involved. But when the Biden administration was looking at all of the national power corridors in the country, this one that goes through our town was the only one identified in the Northeast as a critical infrastructure. Because I think it probably goes all the way to Niagara, Buffalo.
Yeah.
So it's a major highway.
I thought her question was, what does this 800% increase mean for the way that it's going to look going forward? What transformations does that entail?
I believe that what we're seeing happening right now is part of the whole, we've watched this grid, this power line, new metal, high tension poles going up. That upgrade is all due to deal with capacity. Our little substation had gone from a fairly modest thing to a fairly large facility in a short amount of time. And that's so it can handle the switching. All of the power rollout we've seen on the streets here with the 3-phase power that we've been seeing, that's all part of the rollout to be able to get the renewable energy to the substation. The infrastructure is being built right around us. We're in it. So it's gonna be pretty hard to close the doors and put our head in the sand.
You know, one of the things is that this part of the state and country actually is a very low input of sunlight relative to which, I've had my panels under snow since before Thanksgiving. I mean, I've got a nice set of panels, that version is 0.
Yeah.
Are the new transmission lines, insulated?
I don't,
If you wanna do something, folks, walk under those power lines in a snowstorm. just listen to this crackling. I used to ride my bike, my pedal bike underneath the power lines on Summit Street where I live. And the electricity used to arc between my leg and the frame of the bike. That's how much power is being lost in the process. And I read you lose about 40% of the power coming through that wonderful power line that we have. So, you know, it might be a very critical power line because it has these renewables that Peter told us about. I would like to see them a lot more efficient than I've experienced. And do them. Next time it snows, go underneath that power line and listen to it.
We'll have to have a block party.
Part of the reason why they raised the power lines up is because of the clearances that they need for the added voltage and that's going to be going through them.
I'm sure that's true, yeah. All right, so that's sort of that puts a pretty big umbrella around what the task is in front of the planning board in terms of trying to come with zoning revisions that we can put forward. And just to sort of give you a sense of timeline, we have to have the zoning revisions put together in a form that we can petition the select board to consider. And if we actually have to have a draft of all the changes, so we have to have a sound proposal. Right. And then, the select board has, 7 or 14 days to send it back to us to say, okay, and by the way, anyone can put in a proposal for a zoning bylaw to the select board. And that would then come back to the planning board. But because the planning board typically writes zoning bylaw revisions, we still have to go to the select board and they still send it back to us. And once it comes back to us, we're required to have a public hearing that publishes the changes and has a comment period for anyone in town as to what the changes are. That public hearing is similar to the public hearings we have for a special permit. We advertise for it. It's attended. We take comments based upon the comments we receive. We may or may not make revisions depending upon what we hear, but it's generally intended to give us the chance for feedback. And then if that public hearing happens within 21 days of the annual town meeting, we can take those revisions to town meeting to be voted on. If the public hearing happens more than 21 days before the annual town meeting, then the planning board has to write a report and put it into the warrant for the town to consider so that we have a published report that says why we're recommending that change. So because these changes we're hopeful to incorporate for our May town meeting, we're going to try to do a fast tracked program where we will have our public hearing within 21 days of the annual town meeting, which somewhat dovetails into the timeline for the MIT study to happen. And they're aware of our desire to try to have something ready for town meeting, because one of the things that's a nuance of our local government is that we can only do zoning revisions at an annual town meeting. So if we miss this May, we will have to wait a year before we can come back to the town for potential revisions. So it might be that we decide what are the key things that we know we can get a handle on and put those in, the idea that we might actually come back in another year with some additional revisions. But we know, for example, some examples of things where we know the setbacks are currently inadequate. We're not providing enough protection from our abutters. We want to explore the concept of an agricultural overlay district that protects our farmlands in particular. But if we do that, that has the side effect of putting pressure on our woodlands. So part of the conversation that I hope that will come from our involvement with the MIT project is to understand what are those two trade-offs. And it might be that if we allow solar in agricultural areas, it's only agrivoltaics where the arrays allow for agricultural activities, so we don't lose the ability to use the land.
You know, our largest crop in this town is trees. Trees, and forested land is agricultural land. The, project on North Union Street is on Marlow and Few soils. Those are our prime ag lands in this town. Answer one question, and you probably discussed this in here, but is town zoned to be either residential or agricultural?
Correct.
Okay, how do we allow an industrial project to come into that zone? We don't have any industrial area
That's correct.
in this town. But we're gonna allow these are industrial projects that come into a town that's zoned, that's either agricultural or residential.
So that happened, when we adopted the Green Communities program, and became a green community, one of the requirements was that we adopt a zoning bylaw that allows solar.
Right.
And we had to have somewhere in the community that it was allowed by right, and then we could have it by special permit elsewhere. And so the reason why it's a use that's allowed in town is because of our relationship with, because it wasn't part of our bylaw.
Doesn't that green communities have a limit size of the capacity?
No.
It did at one time.
Well, it's also part of the state zoning act, so you can't, as
Right.
all communities, it's part of the zoning act that you can't unreasonably prohibit solar or battery.
Right.
So every town in the state has to allow solar regardless of if you're zoned.
Right.
Yeah.
But I don't think we'd be in this position without that.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
so it's,
Right.
yeah,
yeah, it's the.
Right.
So there's really no sense in having the green community as far as the solar aspects of that program. Because every town's gotta have solar anyway. So why do we, big deal about the, solar aspects of it? But to be eligible for the green community and the funds associated with it.
Well, what I was saying is that our bylaw came into effect because it was a requirement when we adopted that program.
No limit on side.
That's correct.
Oh, that was a mistake.
Well,
I'd
Yeah.
say, but I mean, I think that's
2020.
what, also what we should be thinking is because I hear the word growth a lot and I mean, I don't see how we can outrun, how can you become carbon neutral when everything's growing exponentially as a need? So I think just being conscious of maybe, I think, Peter, you mentioned our values of, as a town. So I mean, I think that we should have a limit of what can happen here. And towns need to be pushing back. We need to do our share, but we need to push back also.
Right.
And not, I
well, and I think that's part of the conversation.
yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering what the process for, before in the town meeting voting for a moratorium is, like who, does a board have to initiate that?
So we went through that process under advice from town council. We were told that a moratorium on solar would be turned down by the attorney general.
Well, can we give her the opportunity? to
Well,
by voting for it in town I thought that was because it had to be voted for in the annual town
well,
meeting.
it did. So what we decided as a planning board, it would be more effective for us to revise our bylaw than to have a vote on something that gets turned down and then lose our opportunity to try to control our growth.
So we can't do both?
Well, if you wanted to propose a moratorium language to the select board and they send it to the planning board, then we could look at it.
Okay, so that's how it's done
Yeah,
to,
well, anyone can propose a bylaw. And if you wanted to propose a moratorium, you could do that.
gets proposed to the select board. Okay, thank you.
Can we propose a change in our bylaws so that we can amend our bylaws more frequently, rather than once a year?
We could do that. That also would be another town meeting vote.
Would you be open to suggestions from residents about potential bylaw changes?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
I think also the, part of your program is that there are some model bylaws that would be good to kind of look at those to see if there were things in that. Some of them are fill in the blank, but it is a good framework, so if you wanted to look at the right things.
And Kathy and Jude have been researching both BESS and solar in terms of what other communities have done and also what the state regulations that are being rolled out are, so that we know that if we are compatible with those, so we're not trying to come up with proposals that would be deemed inappropriate by the state. Any other questions or?
I feel like I had a full meal.
So just so everyone knows, the Blue Wave proposal is coming up on the 11th. That will be the public hearing. We currently, the application does not include specificity on their best storage system in terms of what they propose or their proposed mitigation for sound or any of the issues related to that. So we told them that was something we needed to have. So hopefully we will get that beforehand. If we do receive it, I will add it to what's on the website currently. The application is currently, there is a PDF on our town website. If there is an amended amount of information, I will post it. So I just want you to know where we're headed.
Just had a question from online, asking if there is an opportunity perhaps with MIT to convene with folks from other towns facing similar issues.
I think the MIT is focused on us as a town. They're also aware of what's happening in the other towns. So I don't know that we're gonna get 2 or 3 students assigned to us. So I don't know that they necessarily have the capacity to do a regional thing. I do think that we will have the opportunity to let other towns know what we've gone through. And hopefully they could learn from us. They see it as an opportunity for them to really have a regional impact. And I guess we're the test tube dummies.
Thank you.
The dummy, yeah, correct, right. All right. There's no other questions. I'll entertain a motion that we adjourn.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.